Okay, so I'm very excited that today we're here with Shara, who is a psychotherapist, a counsellor, and a senior lecturer. And I'm so happy that you're talking to us today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, now, Shara, I'm really excited today because the subject we're going to talk about is anxiety.
Yeah.
Now, tell me if this is right, because I was blown away, but I read that 1 in 5 women currently suffering from anxiety. Is that right?
Yeah, so anxiety is actually the lead cause or the lead mental health issue for across a lot of domains in terms of age, in terms of gender, in terms of socioeconomic background. But it's a lot more prevalent for women, which I think speaks volumes.
Wow. So when you say it's more prevalent for women, how much more is it? So if 1 in 5 women are suffering from it, how many men are suffering from it in comparison? Do we know those stats?
Look, it's really, really hard to actually give a very clear and I think a realistic, evidence-based statistic based on that, because you've got issues with men not seeking help. So to have an actual realistic outlook on what those stats could be, I think a very difficult when it comes to gender. You've also got women who are time poor. They don't have time to go to the doctor and, get help for that sort of stuff. So I think it's very actually difficult to capture what a realistic statistic could be based on those gendered domains.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that the statistics we have are based on people who go and get help, and there's
Correct.
lots of people who don't get help, so it
Correct.
could be a lot more.
Oh, it's 100% a lot more, I think. And, you see, people suffering in terms of being unable to cope with stress, not having healthy coping mechanisms. And so anxiety really is, I think, a core factor in other core morbid associations with mental health, and also other issues like substance abuse. It can also create issues around divorce or financial sort of issues with, the way people communicate when there's financial stress. So anxiety really sort of speaks to the core of a lot of mental health issues, but also other issues as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very widespread, isn't it? So would you say that over the years, especially obviously from COVID, but would you say even pre-COVID, anxiety is increasing because of our lifestyle, or is that something else playing in?
Look, that's a really good question. And I think pre-COVID, because it really is pre and post-COVID, pre-COVID, anxiety really sort of centered around, and this is one of my favorite quotes, especially in relation to women, but comparison is a thief of joy.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think as women, if we're focusing on women, we are constantly looking at others to sort of gauge how well we're going, okay? And that might be your friends, your family members, it could be celebrities, which are really unrealistic measures of what we're supposed to be doing or how we're supposed to be going. It's that word supposed to. So I think before COVID, there were those sorts of issues, that comparison sort of scale, and then, other issues around, financial issues like how are we going to afford rent, or, the housing market's only getting worse and there's anxiety around that. But then COVID hit, and I think a lot of people had that real insular sense of anxiety to do with health and how society's going. And we had those daily updates with that Gladys used to give us, and everyone would be watching it, reading the news compulsively. So then we saw a real increase in things like social media feeds, getting information from social media and screens, and that almost compulsive checking. And then isolation, of course, really exacerbated those issues. And then post-COVID, we're living it now. We've got cost of living issues. We've got a lot of relationships that sort of in COVID, you really saw the negatives in having that relationship with people. A lot of relationship breakdowns. You know, I read the other day that marriages licenses being granted are only just getting back on track pre-COVID.
Wow.
Yeah, so COVID really sort of impacted relationships, not just with other people, but also I think with ourselves as well.
Yeah, that's it's unbelievable, isn't it, when you think of the impact it's
Yeah.
actually had. And then, you know, obviously we talked about anxiety increasing, but when we have anxiety, what is it doing to us? What is the chemical reaction in our bodies that's causing it, and what is the effect it's having on our body?
So, look, anxiety is really sort of a result of or is associated with a fight or flight sort of response, okay? And usually that's quite good because that is a response to an external or internal stimuli that is preparing us to get ready to fight or to get to safety. And in small doses, that can be quite good because we, you know, can really harness that to get, you know, a deadline completed. You know, I think we've all been there. So in small doses, it can be good, but when it starts to become something that you're experiencing all the time, that's when it can really turn into an issue, and anxiety is what that is. Physiologically, you might experience things like a racing heart, sweaty palms. You may feel anxiety in particular places. So some people feel it in their gut. I think that's the most common. You may feel, you know, tingles up and down your limbs. And that's really sort of a release of, you know, certain neurochemicals like cortisol and adrenaline. But it's these things that are sort of making us feel amped up. And then if you're not sort of looking at how you can mitigate those physiological responses, it then can turn into a full-blown panic attack where you, and a lot of people say, I thought I was having a heart attack. So it can be quite as serious as that.
Yeah, wow, it's frightening. I can really relate to it because, probably about 2-3 years ago, I'd sold the Healthy Mummy business, and then there were new people who'd come on, and it was an enormously stressful time for me, like enormously stressful. And you know, I don't want to talk about the ins and outs of what happened, but it was extremely stressful, and I had so much anxiety about everything that was happening. And I can remember I used to wake up in the middle of the night with literally a pit of sickness in my stomach, and it was literally so stressful. And then when I'd wake up in the morning, I'd try and go for a walk to try and like flush it out of my body and just try and walk, and it wouldn't go. And I was left constantly with this just like, I don't know what it was. It was just like this sickness that kind of took over my body, and I felt so anxious, and my heart would be racing all the time. And it kind of went on and on and on. And I think that, and then the whatever was happening continued happening, and it got worse and worse and worse. And the only way I could stop it was to take control and say, I resign and I leave. And that was the only way I could stop it. And literally, I think that the moment I made that decision to leave and step away from everything that was causing that stress and anxiety, kind of just felt this relief. And it was a scary thing to do because I loved that business, and I loved the staff and the customers, but it was the only way to stop that never-ending anxiety. So I can really understand like what anxiety can do to someone physically. But if someone can't walk away from something because of whatever reason, what are the things that we can do to kind of try and mitigate that anxiety or stress? Is there anything we can do?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that's a really good point that you made in terms of regaining that control. I think anxiety can make a lot of us feel really helpless. It sort of feels like these things that are happening to us and within us are really not in our control. And, you know, while you may not be able to remove yourself from that situation, there are certain things you can do to help yourself, I guess, cope with that those feelings. So if anxiety is actually becoming such a big problem for you that you are finding it's interrupting how you function in your life, the first thing I would say is reach out to your healthcare professional, okay? Really getting that early on is key. And so some people can manage anxiety with certain strategies that I'll speak about in a minute, but sometimes you can't, and it's accepting that, and that's okay. And you might need that extra sort of pharmaceutical help. So understanding, what your triggers are, understanding how it's affecting you, I think is really important, and then getting that help. Sometimes some people can understand that their anxiety is being triggered by something as opposed to a situation like you've just described. So in those cases, you need to sort of think about, okay, what am I reacting to here? What is my trigger? And it can be really hard to actually, find what your trigger is. Yeah. So I think a really good sort of strategy to explore what that might be for you is sit with that feeling that you are, the beating heart, the sweaty palms, the racing mind, and think about your environment. Okay, where are you? It could be a very sort of tactile thing. It could be a sense of smell. It could be an actual environment. So maybe it's a workplace or, hearing of a particular sound. Triggers can be anything, and they're so connected to trauma or a past experience that they can actually elicit that response in us. So try and find out what your trigger is. Another way you can try and find out what your trigger is to actually journal, okay? So what is the feeling that you felt before you felt the physiological symptoms of anxiety? What are you thinking? What did you feel or think after? What did you do after? So really going step by step, which can be really hard. Yeah. I just want to acknowledge that, to actually have the presence of mind to do that in that state. It can be really hard, but it doesn't have to be writing. You can do a voice recording, but it needs to be something that you can go back and look at. And what you'll find is there are patterns emerging here. So it could be a phone call from someone or interaction with a person. It could be a particular date or time of year that you've actually got a really bad memory of. And it could be a work situation. So there are other things like stress that can also cause anxiety, which is also quite complex. So, using those sorts of strategies can really help in finding out what your triggers are, because they will be different for everyone based on your experience. Other strategies, I think, and I say this all the time, things like meditation, mindfulness, getting, going outside and getting some sort of physical, movement. And while that didn't work for you, and it
could have been worse.
It could have been, you never know. So, that won't work for everyone. So it's finding out what works for you, but trying everything, because you've got nothing to lose except getting worse.
Yeah.
So other sort of strategies could be distraction really works for some people. So if you feel yourself sort of going into that state where you are feeling those physiological symptoms of anxiety, do something that you, first of all, love. So it could be anything, could be gardening, art, listening to music, going for a walk, going for a drive. But do something that you love and then distracts you from that feeling or removes you from that state. So different things will work for everyone. It's all about finding out what works for you. But like I said at the start, if you are feeling like this is really, something that's becoming unmanageable, definitely go to your healthcare professional, because it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, no, it's unbelievable, isn't it? And I know someone who's had a terrible, stressful time at work, and what's happened to them with anxiety is they've developed this crazy skin rash because the stress and the anxiety is come through the skin, and whenever now she's stressed, it comes back out. So it's I find it just, incredible just how, something that's happened really happens in the mind then comes through into the body, and just how the mind and the body are so connected. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
And that's so true. What you feel and what you think can definitely manifest in the physical, and there are many immunoresponses to things like anxiety or mental health conditions. Say, for example, herpes simplex. When people are stressed, they often say, oh, I feel so run down, and they might get a cold sore and an outbreak. Quite similar to the rash that your friend's talking about as well. So it's really important to understand that these parts of our body, it's a whole. They don't work in isolation from each other. So, I myself recently have had issues with, with my gut. I've taken a load of antibiotics and I just have not found the time to sort of rebalance myself. And what I'm finding is my sleep is really off. Sometimes my mood is really, very volatile. If I'm, especially at the end of the day, if I'm really tired and my children are being children, it can get, I'm not as tolerant.
Yeah.
Right. So whereas before I never had that. I found that I could deal with whatever they chucked at me most of the time. There are lots of interactional patterns with our body and our mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually on that note, with kind of moods and children, do you see that as women get older, anxiety gets worse with hormones changing in perimenopause and menopause? Are you seeing that with your kind of patients?
Yeah, look, the thing is, women are, so complex, and it's not as easy as, now I'm going through this stage and this is what I'm feeling, because it's different for everyone. And you can enter into that perimenopause stage 10 years before you actually hit menopause, right? So you've got 10 years of trying to figure out why I'm not, why things are so different. So, and then we go through stages where we've got kids, they get older. So definitely, I think hormones play a big role in how we feel and how we react to things. And I think anxiety is definitely one of them. So for me, in my sort of own personal experience, my kids getting older and going to, say, high school, I never thought I'd be one of those anxious mums where I would be really concerned about the future and how my child was going to settle in, react, etc. In my 20s, I had my kids quite young. In my 20s, I was very laid back, and I never had that anxiety about whenever I thought about them, growing up. I didn't have that. And now I find, as I'm getting older, that definitely does play a part, and it does, take up some sort of room in my cognition and how I look at the future. So that anxiety to do with children, to do with career, to do with a lot of areas of your life, I think can sort of blow out of proportion if we don't get a handle on it, which again, like you said, is quite hard when you're going through those stages of hormonal changes.
It is. It's so hard. It's so funny because it's not funny, but my little one had a really bad accident at school a few weeks ago, and I got the call. You see the number and the school. Oh my God! And he had his front teeth knocked out, and it was honestly, I was in a right state. Because I was frightened for him. He was in pain. I'd never experienced teeth issue before. And it was so traumatic, honestly. I was so traumatized. He was traumatized. We were all traumatized. And it took me like days and days and days just to get over the actual trauma and the anxiety. And even now, it's been a good few weeks, and I can't go anywhere without my phone because I'm so worried. Like, he's had the teeth put back in, but it doesn't mean they're going to stay because it's still early days. And he's had root canals and all kinds of stuff. But I'm so worried because I tell him every day he goes to school, be careful, because he can't get a knock, you know. And every time my phone rings, I'm like, oh my God, is it school? Has it come out again? Because I'm like, you know, I'm so anxious and traumatized about what happened. And so much so that I had this terrible migraine that came on from the trauma. And then I blacked out, and then I fractured my face from it because I blacked out, and then I put my rib out, and I'm like, it's just a disaster for me in my house the past few weeks. But I think it just goes to show just the effect anxiety or stress can have on your overall body, because I was fine up until then. Everything was, you know, hunky-dory, and then it all just went, you know, all went really bad. And I'm anxious now for him. And then my husband's like, you can't wrap him in cotton wool. And I'm like, I can.
And I will.
I will. But I'm trying to be a little bit more kind of flexible and letting him to do stuff. But it's that anxiety. It does kind of grip you, because, you know, any mother doesn't want anything to happen to their child. And it's funny because my little boys go, Mum, why are you so stressed? And I'm like, well, because you grew inside of me. We shared our body, and it's a different bond that we have than you know, than you and Dad have. Like, it's different. So I care immensely. I'm worried for you. And he laughs and thinks I'm funny, but it's true, you know. So, but I'm a bit nuts. But anyway.
No, look, I mean, that's not nuts at all. And I think a lot of mums would relate to that. You know, you have this innate sort of feeling when it comes to your children. But I think women also do this quite a lot because we're so much in our head, because everything is so busy. Yeah. We are almost vicariously traumatized and re-traumatized again and again by a fact. And we think, what could I have done different? Or, you know, it's just we always sort of stew on, you know, things that have happened in the past that we have no control over, right? And so then again, it comes back to that issue of feeling helpless and not having control. So, you know, really making sure we are actually being aware and cognizant of the fact that we control our thoughts, right? And they don't control us. So every time we go back to an event where something happened, and believe me, I've got those. I think every person has them. Just understanding that, you know, you can't go back there because that could be your trigger. Yeah,
absolutely. And is there any advice you can give to all of us to kind of build our strength up so that when things happen, anxiety can't get a hold? Is there anything that we can do, or is there not?
No, look, there definitely is, but it's not easy and it takes hard work. But one of the big things are things like resilience, so building resilience and understanding that, look, we can't, if we're in a relationship or in a work environment that's really stressful, you know, for the work environment, we can't quit work, right? Because for obvious reasons. So learning how to cope with that stress is really important. So things like I said, you know, engaging in things like meditation is really, really helpful. And the research surrounding the impact that meditation can have in terms of coping with stressful situations, multitasking, just setting you up for the day. It's really an understated thing that people don't do. So there are.
How does it work, Shara? Because I mean, I've never done it, and because I'm just a bit of a, I'm like, I'm not a calm person. I'm a very I do too many things, and I probably should try it. But I always think, God, I can't imagine myself sitting there and being quiet. It's just not me. But talk to me, sell me the benefits and why it works, and maybe I'll give it a go.
Look, if you are like, you know, a person who is always on the go, yes, I'm not going to lie, it's going to be extra hard, but it doesn't need to be a big thing, okay? So you've dropped your kids off from school, just take a minute when they get out of the car, just take a minute to either, and this again is different for everyone. So some people are very visual, so you can visualize, you know, close your eyes and visualize yourself on a beach and just imagine you're, you know, sticking your feet into the sand. Or if the beach is not your thing, think about a rainforest. Think about feeling, you know, the dampness of the soil on your feet. And it's really having that mind and body connection. There are lots of apps that you can, utilize. Some people find that really hard to disconnect their mind from, what comes next. So, using a, aid that, engages all of your senses. So it could be someone talking, it could be music, that sort of stuff is really helpful for people who are just quite busy and on the go.
And what is it doing? What is that? What? Because I'm thinking now of a beautiful beach.
Yep.
With nobody on, nice water. I'm already thinking I'm feeling calmer. But what is that doing to my brain to kind of help, make it prepared for any kind of anxiety attacks?
Yeah. So what it's doing is, and look, if you're doing that once, it's not going to do much except make you calm for the moment.
Yeah.
So it really, like I says, takes commitment, and it can be a bit hard, but as long as you're consistent, and forgive yourself if you don't do it every day, but as long as you're consistent. And what that's doing is creating neural pathways in your brain that is actually sort of saying to you, so this is the stressful situation, but the minute you engage in this visualization or the minute you engage in, the words that you say to yourself that calm you, your brain's actually going, okay, so I'm going to go down this pathway now that is going to make me more at ease, more calm. And so that's sort of what is part of resilience building. Okay. So it's creating different ways to cope. And that can be done, in a neural sort of level, but also so that you actually can have control of the situation and not let it control you.
I love it. So it's like creating your happy place to go to. So, when something goes wrong, it's like, nah, I'm going to go to my happy place.
Yeah.
I'm going to ignore the stress that's there, and I'm going to go to this nice Zen place.
Yeah, and
like it.
it's just getting you prepared to cope with what's to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's important because life's not perfect, right?
No.
Life is full of ups and downs and, zigzags and all kinds of stuff. Like, it's impossible to have this clear runway of perfection, right? There's going to be things. So I think that's a really great tip. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it.
Let me know how it goes.
Well, thank you so much. I think that it's so interesting learning about all this kind of brain effect and anxiety. And I think most importantly, the effect it has on our physical state, because that's when we can really, really start seeing it as well.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been fantastic. And I can't wait to talk to you next.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.